presence here in this moment, because you'll get the recordings for the other talks. So we're making a transition. And the reason I'm asking you to get really present in your body here with me today is because throughout this journey, I'm going to be asking you to hear my words with your soul and with your body. And so we're going to get rolling here any moment. Let me get my screen shared and chat off. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Art of Standing in Your Sovereignty. It's good to be the queen. And that is just an archetype that represents standing in your sovereignty. And I'm Dina Tibbs. I'm here today as your guide, feminine wisdom teacher, and mentor. And we're going on a little bit of a journey together. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but I'm sure that you have probably read my bio, so I don't have to spend too much time there. But I've been working in the healing, creative, and spiritual arts for nearly 20 years now. I've worked with many. I've been so blessed to work with so many of my own guides, teachers, and mentors. And over the years, I just weaved a whole lot of teaching into a few potent ways of working, one of which is my passion to help women recognize and stand in their own sovereignty, and to remember who they are at the deepest of levels, and to be able to share their own gifts, their own passions with the world, because the world really desperately needs it right now. And so the journey that we're going on is a discussion on what sovereignty is and what it isn't. A very brief overview of what an archetype is. There's been some other teachings today that have been fabulous on archetypes, and it is a lifelong study. We'll go in and meet your queen and look at her qualities and in 4 different ways in which she shows up. And then that's both light and shadow qualities. And then hopefully we have time to understand what it is to be empowered, and when you are perhaps leaking power, and then taking radical responsibility for your own story. And then, of course, becoming aware of when you aren't, or when you're moving into shadow territory. And then hopefully we have some time for some question and answer. And so the dictionary definition of sovereignty is the quality or state of being sovereign or having supreme power or authority. And I'll go into that more deeply, but let's just say that in my view, that means internal sovereignty, internal power, and internal inner authority. And one of my wise teachers, this is a mantra that helps bring me back to my own sovereignty all the time. And that's from Christine Arilo, beautiful mentor and friend of mine. I promise to take care of myself and stay true to myself, even if that means disappointing another. And sometimes that one's a little bit hard to take. So I invite you today throughout this journey to, again, be in your body and really feel when you can feel something ping you, particularly in the light side of some of these archetypal expressions. That's often a remembrance of one of your own innate gifts and qualities. And then certainly what might repulse or repel you, which could very well be a shadow side or a shadow story. And so sovereignty, what is it? It's an inside job, first of all. Being in your sovereignty is being within your own inner wisdom and your own inner authority. And it is an awareness that's an art form. And it's not a 30-day to anything. It's very much a lifelong practice of getting to know yourself in both the light and the shadow very, very deeply. And it is my view, we are all born divine sovereign beings, and then we tend to forget that as we take our life journeys. And that you can claim and be the queen or the king of your own domain. And you are at choice to decide what gets to take up space in that domain, and invite the people, the situations, the relationships, the jobs in to take up the space that you desire. And you most certainly non-negotiably trust your own inner wisdom, and you make choices for your highest good. That's the hallmark of being in your sovereignty, is making good choices in all aspects of your life. And a real keen awareness that you are the authority and author of the story that you write, and the life that you create. You absolutely know what your heart and soul desires are, and you make a choice to co-create those with your divine, whatever that is for you. And you take radical responsibility for your choices, which means we make choices from our inner wisdom. We step into our own stories, but we also understand that all of our choices impact others. And most importantly, when you're standing in your sovereignty, you are a way shower for others. When you can empower yourselves just by being who you are and being present, because your presence is the gift, you are able to empower others just by being that. What it is not is manipulating, controlling, forcing things. First on yourself, because we love to get into, we can manipulate ourselves like beyond belief, but most importantly, not about manipulating and controlling others. And it's not about how much external power you have, it's about how much internal power you have. And it's not hierarchical. It's a recognition that everyone else around us is also a sovereign being. It's not letting life just happen to you and sit back and watch. It's you making a choice to happen to life. And I won't get into the abundance piece, but sovereignty does not necessarily mean just material abundance or doing whatever it takes to protect that. Because we get into a lot of stories around abundance and financials and material goods, and those actually often control us and have us go out of our sovereignty. And it's most importantly not asking what everyone else in the world for their opinion about what you should do with your life. It is about knowing when to call in your wise counsel and share stories amongst each other so that you can take that wisdom and marry it with your own. And as I mentioned before, sovereignty is not only about you, but the work is within you. And it's about knowing that your choices make an impact and being very, very clear of what that impact is. So we're going to talk really briefly about what an archetype is, because this is a very, very, very deep study path, but you don't have to be a PhD in Jungian psychology to work with archetypes. They're patterns that go back really to the beginning of time, that is a universal pattern, behavior, or motif that has been the context for every myth, every legend, pretty much every religion. And it's traits that reside within the collective unconscious. You see it, of course, in Hollywood movies, if we want to bring it more modern, all the time. And developing deep relationships with those archetypes that are strong in you, that are innate in you, is stepping more deeply into your power. So it's a getting to know thyself in order to be more within your power. And just real quickly, the word archetype is from the Greek, and it means the first of its kind. So it is, again, that collective conscious first pattern that we begin to see emerge within the collective consciousness. And they're universal, they're timeless, and they're infinite. And generally speaking, although you may read about them in the written word, they come through in symbol, in image, and metaphor most strongly. And the reason for that is because our soul language and the divine's language is symbol, metaphor, and image. So when we can begin to work with that and recognize our lives from a higher symbolic perspective, we can more deeply co-create with our divine, and we can more deeply step into our own personal stories. And each archetype, and there's many, I'm focusing on the Queen today with a weaving in of some others that I've worked deeply with, all have a light and shadow side. And that doesn't mean bad or good or positive or negative. They are whole within themselves, and therefore so are you. And so it's a recognition of the light and the highest expression of that archetype. And then it's also very much an awareness of the shadow side that's coming up, because that awareness is often, if you're really aware, When you're stepping into the shadow, it's a clue that you're leaking power. And if you don't become aware of it until later, it's a symbol or a symptom of leaking power. And so the gifts are really, really working within the shadows. And that's the work I tend to do in my one-on work, especially because it's deep work. And I didn't go deeply into my own personal story, but I've spent time in the shadows. There's been times where I've packed my bags and moved into the underworld, and that is not a place I recommend moving into for very long. So it's in that recognition of the shadows that you are able to then illuminate the light. We're not trying to fix the shadows. We're trying to love them back into us as part of our wholeness. So meeting your queen. I've developed over the years of my own inner work and with others 4 different types of queens, and they're all the same in their highest expression, in that they however it shows up for you, it means you have non-negotiable trust in your inner wisdom. The different types that I've observed over the years is really just a difference in how you access that wisdom, and often a difference in how the shadows show up for you. And therefore, some of the work that I do with people and the practices I give will be based on what is in resonance for you, based on which queen you most deeply resonate with. And again, we have all the archetypes within us innately, but some show up stronger than others. And sometimes that's based on the ages and stages of your journey, of your heroine's journey. Some may be stronger in the moment than others. And so this work is really stopping and slowing down and having a recognition of where you're at. And so out of all this work, I've developed the Sovereign, which is kind of the normal queen that you will see out in the archetypes world if you read anything on the archetypes. The Wise Queen, which is a weaving of a couple of different archetypes, the Benevolent, and the Maiden. And so again, as I go through these, pay attention to what pings in your body, and that is a recognition for you. And so the Sovereign Queen in the light, really in her highest expression, she is a force to be reckoned with. And Hollywood portrays the queen as an either or, either good or evil. And yet there's this whole spectrum in between. If you watch any movies, Once Upon a Time was a great show. Most of the time, the good queen had some shadowy aspects within her that she wasn't in realization or awareness of. And then the evil queen has such wisdom and so many gifts that she tends to sort of hoard for herself. So there's a whole lot of gray area in between good and evil in the way the queen is portrayed out in the mass world. But really, she represents and has an understanding of power and authority in not just herself, but all women, and in actuality, all beings. And she's known as the queen of her domain. You know her when she steps into the room. First, she's the queen of her own inner domain, and then she's the queen of her outer domain. And it doesn't matter what that is. It could be the home, it could be in the boardroom, but you know her when she walks in the door. And she really trusts her own inner wisdom and does not negotiate it away or sell it to the highest bidder. And most importantly, she uses that wisdom not just from an egoic perspective, but to share it and then light up other people's wisdom and leadership and empower them. She uses her resources in all aspects of her life, whatever she's got, very, very wisely. And she shares what she has to share, but she knows that she's doing that from a fully resourced place. And that's energetic resource. It could be time resource. It could be financial resource. And she's a warrior. She understands the scope and she understands the impact on others. And she also knows when to call in the wise counsels, because she knows what her gifts and superpowers are and what they aren't. The one in the shadows, off with your head. Her big shadow is most certainly not listening to her own wisdom or the wisdom of anyone else's. She is a controller, a manipulator, and forces everyone around her to set her conditions, live under her rule, basically, or she can get angry. And we've seen it. I've been it. That is me in the shadow side for sure. Most often because she actually feels very, very powerless over all the things going on externally to her, and that she has no power to change it, except that the change comes from within, and she maybe doesn't want to see that. And often will not recognize or ask for support from the wise counselors that are around her and waiting to share with her. And so for her, each one of these, I'm going to give a short journal question and then a practice that you can use upon at home after the summit is over. But for journaling with her, the question becomes, where are you making your choices from? Is it from ego, or is it from your heart and soul desire? And is it for the highest good? And then also ask, when you're at a choice point, am I forcing this, or am I letting it flow through me? And those are important questions for the Sovereign Queen. And as a practice, I would invite you, if this one resonates for you, to give up control over something. You know, whether that's how the dishes get loaded in the dishwasher, because I know that one, or, you know, if you're on a big project with a group of people, make the choice to give up control over that and let other people share their gifts, and really just be there as the leader instead of the doer. So that's a practice. And that control, giving up of control, could be something really teeny tiny, or it could be something huge and big. But that's really where the work and the practice is for stepping out of the shadow and into the light when you're in the Sovereign Queen energy. The Wise Queen. She has the strongest intuitive gift of the balance between intellectual knowing and intuitive knowing. And she's able to weave those together to make wise choices. And she uses life experience as a teaching for herself and for others. She's the one who's kind of been there, done that, seen it all, and knows that life is a cosmic joke, and that it's a mystery, and that we really can't control anything. We can just use our life experience as wisdom and move forth in that. And in her highest expression, she shares that wisdom. And she also is masterful at creating strategic alliances and calling in others in collaboration and a sharing of wisdom instead of holding on to it. So she just loves to really, she's the one who's always learning something, who sees the larger patterns that are going on out there in the collective, and she's able to not attach to those and share her wisdom. Now, the Wise Queen in the shadow generally is living up here and not in the body, or not in the heart and soul. She's in the books, she's behind the computer, but she's not quieting down to listen long enough to what her own wisdom has to say. But she's the person that everybody comes to for wisdom. So she's often giving wisdom out and advice out to everyone else, but not necessarily tapping in and listening to the wisdom for herself. And she can often be seen as sort of the know-it-all in the room, or an idea of just really overcomplicating everything instead of being in its essence or in its simplicity. And she's the one who also ignores the signals from her body and can tend to get sick or mentally exhausted when it's a little too late, instead of just slowing down and listening. And so for her, and often she does this, doesn't share her wisdom because of self-doubt. That's the shadow story that often comes up, is that she doubts what it is she just knows, because she can't always explain what she knows or how she knows it. She just knows it. And so for you, if this is in resonance, a journal process would be, where in your life or where in your sharing of wisdom are you sitting in doubt? Where are you doubting yourself? And where in your life are you not listening to the intuition that it's coming through? You're just not listening to it. You're making a choice to not listen to it because you're doubting it. So journal on that. And a practice to begin to listen to it more and trust it more is to get out of your head and into your body. And so first thing in the morning, really activate your body while you're still in bed, if possible. Stretch, rotate your joints, get into your body, ask yourself, what of my own wisdom do I have to share today? What do I need to hear from my inner wisdom today? And keep that with you throughout the whole day. And most importantly, is do not, for a period of time after you get up, take in any external knowledge, wisdom, media. Stay internal. Now, some of us have to be with families and two-leggeds and four-leggeds and be with people. That's okay, but stay off media. Don't receive information from any external source, if at all possible. And really get into your body and ask your body what it has to say for that day. And then if you want to consult, you're the one who loves to consult the oracles or consult a sacred text, do that, but know that it's to provide additional information to what you already know. Oh, our benevolent queen, our good queen. Her really strong intuitive channels, or where she gets her wisdom from, is in the five senses, plus then of course the sixth of intuition. So she's always, using visuals. She's around beauty. She touches, she tastes, she slows down long enough to engage her senses and be with them and listen to them. And in her highest expression, she is the one who's the most kind, the most compassionate, the most generous. She's the giving one, without over giving. She knows how resourced she is and the resources she has to give. And she's the one who can really intuit what other people need if she's paying attention, and provide that through wisdom, through comfort, through beautiful spaces, both physically and energetically. She's the one who just holds the compassion and holds the love and holds the beauty. And she does it while still allowing others to take responsibility for themselves and their own happiness. And she takes pleasure, like I said, in creating beautiful spaces and sanctuaries, and just is really that benevolent queen. You know her when you see her because she looks beautiful, her spaces are beautiful, and she's a calm, kind, and compassionate presence because she recognizes the beauty in absolutely everything. But in her shadow, she may be focused more on what's happening externally as opposed to what's happening internally, or she doesn't slow down long enough to tap into her senses to get that information, to really be in a place where she's sharing and giving from her heart and not from her ego, because she is the one who often takes care of everyone else but themselves until she's in exhaustion. This is pinging for you, you may be the one who you're not even on your own list when you're really in your shadows. And a lot of times that comes from old stories about equating being needed to being loved. And that's a deep one I go through with many, many, many of my clients. Excuse me. Or you're giving conditionally and expecting something in return. And when you don't get it, you perhaps go into resentment or anger. And one thing I want to say about this particular queen is that when you're taking responsibility for everyone else's happiness and all of their needs except for your own, what you're actually doing is taking away from that person's sovereignty. So I want that to really sit with you. When you're doing all things for all people, you're not allowing them to be their divine sovereign beings. And so for this one, I'd really like you to journal on what situations or to whom am I overgiving or taking full responsibility for, and then becoming resentful. And how can I give them back their responsibility over their own sovereignty? And the practice for this one is practice saying no or no, not right now, that you're not dropping everything, most particularly your inner work and your self-care, to go take care of things. And know very much so that no, or no, not right now, or this is not in resonance for me, is very much a complete sentence. You do not have to explain yourself any further than that. That's it. No, or no, not right now. Come talk to me later. Oh, the maiden queen. This is the one who's just awakening to all that life has to offer. And she receives her intuitive information, if she slows down, is through play and creative practice, whatever that means for you. That could be any creative venture, songwriting, singing, dancing, art making, and you're doing it to get your intuitive information, not necessarily to bring it externally or to place some outer value on it, but as a way to tap more deeply into yourself. And in her highest expression, again, she's the playful one, she's the creative one, she's the magnetic one, she's the inspired one, she's the muse. And she's always coming up with ideas for herself and for others. And in her highest expression, she can take those ideas, discern which ones she wants to focus on, and bring those into form. And she loves herself. She takes life, in stride, and also loves to take risks, and knows that everything really is an experiment. Like there's no comparison queen when the maiden queen's in her highest expression. As in her shadow, there may be, but you really use your creative energies and your ideas to tap more deeply into your own wisdom and discern where you're going to focus your energy and your gifts, because you're that big, bright, shining light out in the world, and you've got a lot of paths and a lot of excitement in front of you, and you're willing to experiment with anything that comes up that resonates for you in the moment. So this is a really exciting place to be. And an energy that, for me personally, I have to surround myself with other maiden queens to bring more of this into my life and not take everything so seriously all the time. But in the shadows, her big shadow is not trusting, really not trusting her own inner wisdom, or even knowing how to tap into it. Most often because she's still really concerned about what the external world thinks of her, how she should act, how she should look, what she should be doing. This is the one that's just beginning to claim her sovereignty and really understand that the external is not important, that she needs to stand in her own gifts. She's often the one that's looking outside of herself to be saved. And really only you can save yourself within your own sovereignty. And with all those gifts and the light that you have, that is the work. There is knowing that you have the power, knowing that you have the wisdom, and knowing that you can slow down long enough to listen to it. Because in the shadows, there's often a lot of energy being spent in choices that maybe were not for her highest good or for your highest good. So being discerning about where your focus, where your energy is going, is really important for this iteration of the queen. And because you love to play and you're experimenting with lots of different things, and say lots of different spiritual paths, for example, it's often hard to get you focused in and take action from that place, because sometimes you resist structure. There's often a story that says, if I'm structured, I can't be creative. But the truth is, when you have structure is a container to harness your potent energy, rather than have it be all over the place in chaos, and not be able to focus or bring anything out into the world. And so your journaling is going to be on really where is that happening in your life, and how can you bring more focus in for those things that are in your highest good and that really light you up from the inside out, so that you can then share that with other people. But first, a structure and a support system and a focusing process needs to take place, and that those processes can be fun. This is the one where I really work with the creatives on creating structure that is creative and that is fun, and that's a weaving of one of my gifts, which is a balance of masculine and feminine energy, or left and right brain, if you want to call it that. And that's where I help my maiden queens most often, is to really bring their energy into focus and potency, because there's a lot of potent energy there. And so that's your journal practice. And then a practice is, when you're in creative mode, is to go into it with an intention to tap into your wisdom. So if you're going to paint something, start by saying, what does my wisdom want me to know? And just ask that question and begin, or dancing, begin your creative process, and then just see what answers come towards the end of that. Or if you have a specific question for your inner wisdom, you can ask that as well, and then go into the creative process and see what answers come without attaching very deeply to those. So to move on to, I hope, first of all, that there's some resonance there with one or many of those, and that you do take note, and when you see the recording of some of these journal practices and actual practices to get more deeply into your own inner wisdom, because it is through that that we really begin to recognize, again, when we go into shadow, that if we're recognizing an awareness of it early enough, we understand that that's a clue that we're starting to leak power. And then there's deep tools and techniques to reclaim and recall that power. And then, again, also as you do this work, it may be that, yes, you leaked power, and then you kind of reverse engineer and say, okay, where was I in my shadow? What situation brought this about? And you can go deeper using those inner wisdom and intuitive tools to get to your answer and make a shift for the next time that you encounter that relationship or you encounter that situation. And so when I talk about empowerment, I really, we kind of get a little roughly sometimes around that word power, because if we're looking at the collective consciousness or the external world, power has become really, really corrupted and what it means. And it has, in fact, been designed, the systems and structures in which we live, it's been designed to make us feel powerless. And so it's up to us to know that the power lives within and we can reclaim it. And when we're in deep alignment with that, then often whatever chaos is going on in the external world that's out there, especially right now in the world that we're in, staying centered, staying in our lane, understanding what our gifts are, continuing to share them with the world, no matter what, is really, it's needed. It's needed in the world right now, so that we begin as a collective to break down the systems that were set up to make us feel powerless, is to be honest. And so some questions for you, of course, is what is your relationship to power, and perhaps even that word? What feelings does it bring up for you? And what does inner power look like for you? It's different for everyone. When I speak about the queen and these archetypes, and it was talked about in one of the other archetype discussions today, they all live within us innately, but there are some that are really, really strong within us, and we were born with those, but we forget them. And so when we begin to remember what our inner power is, what our strengths, what our gifts are, we can define what our own inner power looks like. And of course, take note of what systems or areas of your life do you feel powerlessness in, and how can you begin to reclaim that? Because the truth is, what power really means is energy plus choice. Where are you focusing your energy? Where are you allowing your energy to go? And what choices are you making as a result of the amount of energy you have, or where your energy is at? Because the truth is, every choice, every act, every word, every thought is either empowering to yourself and others or disempowering to yourself and others. And everything you do is a creation. And every creation has a ripple effect and an impact on this world. And so as you walk through your days, if you're at a choice point or you're feeling out of alignment, stop in that moment. Stop, breathe, and ask, what is the most empowered choice I can make right now in this moment? Don't overthink it, because you're asking your inner wisdom, and just wait for whatever answer wants to bubble up. And of course, as you do this work more often and more deeply, you will begin to notice when you're leaking power. You'll feel it. You'll feel it in your body, or you'll feel it when you want to start reacting. And, are you leaking power by choice or not by choice? Because we do leak power, or we give power to others, or we give energy to others because they're our beloveds and we've made the choice to do that, and that's okay. But there are still techniques at the end of day, to really recall that back to yourself. And sometimes it's just as much as getting quiet before you go to sleep and thinking of all the ways that you released energy or took on other people's energy, and literally set the intent through your breath is to recall that back to me. I recall my energy back to my being. And it can really be that simple. And you can do it as, many times a day as you feel like you need to. And lastly, once you really begin to feel more sovereign in your skin, recognize more and more of your gifts, there comes with that, like they say, with big power comes big responsibility. There is a process for you to take radical responsibility for your choices, for your stories, for your actions. When it's, knowing women have the habit of apologizing just for taking up space. We don't want to do that, but we also want to know when we've made a choice that impacts others, and maybe did not do it from a place of impeccability, that you take responsibility and make a true apology. So we need to know when it's time to do that. God knows I've had to do that plenty of times throughout my life, especially when I go into Sovereign Queen shadow. Tap into your own wisdom multiple times a day if possible, but definitely in the morning. And again, maybe recall your energy more at night. Work with your own power, work with your victim stories and triggers. And that's where it's really important to have a mentor or therapist or someone, a healer to work with, to hold space for you while you're working with those victim stories and triggers. It's really, really important because, they are there to illuminate for you and hold the path so that you don't pack your bags and move into the underworld for an undetermined amount of time. And then pay attention to where you want to slip out and not take responsibility or blame or give all your responsibility to someone else. And you'll over time become really intimate with your energy and your resources, how resourced you are, how resourced you aren't, and how much you have to give before you start giving to everybody except yourself. And I believe in the time and the space that we are in right now, that standing in your sovereignty is such an important act because it enables you to share your wisdom, share your gifts, and share your superpowers with others. And the planet needs it. It needs you, and it needs your gifts. And know that your presence alone is the gift. Just be present. Be present in your sovereignty. And a last little practice you can take, and I have some videos on this somewhere, is to make a list of your superpowers, and don't be shy. Make a big list. You don't have to share it with anybody else, although I will ask that you do. You take a few that are comfortable for you and share them from the heart, not necessarily with any expectation of anything in return. And even more so, step into your communities and ask everyone within your communities what their superpowers are, so you can come together and collaborate. Because I think right now where the world is at, in order to sustain ourselves and the collective and humanity and all of the beings on earth, is that we need to collaborate and we need to take care of each other and we need to share our gifts. And so I am going to pop off my screen share and check into what's going on here in the room. I think we have a few minutes for questions, which is awesome. Let's see if I have any. No questions right now. If you have any questions, please pop them into the chat and I will be happy to answer them. And I think you get this through your signing up here for the summit. But I have it either here or on my website, which I can type into the chat, is a quiz designed to help you discern which one of your queens may be the strongest. And then you receive some more practices and practical wisdom on how to work with both the light and shadow of that queen archetype or any of the queen archetypes. You can work with bunches of them and step more deeply into who you are at a soul level. And that's really what this is all about, so that you can share your gifts out with the world. Can we be, yeah, so I just mentioned that a little bit, and I meant to mention it earlier, but I want to first of all say that there is not a hierarchy to these queens and these energies. One's not better than the other. And so you may choose to work with any or all of them, and you will certainly see yourself as a mix, because like I said, I have woven other archetypes out there in the world under sort of the focalization of the queen. And some of us have, other archetypes that are stronger than others. The queen may not even be our strongest archetype. We generally have 12 strong ones out of the many, many that are out there. And they often show up more strongly than others in different parts of our lives as well. So when I do deeper archetypal work with people, we look at all the aspects of life, and we look at it based on the houses. So kind of similar to the astrology houses. And we look at who your strongest ones are, and where perhaps in your life they're showing up more, and how they sort of interweave with each other. One archetype often informs the other. And so, for example, for me, Queen happens to be one of my very strong archetypes, and it shows up most strongly in my communications and how I interact with others, particularly when I'm in my other strong archetype, which is as mentor and teacher. And then we'd often be the ones that step into, let's say, a live summit like this, and in our shadows, everything has to be just so. And if it's not, heads will roll. So that's sort of a shadow side of that very strong queen archetype. But Martha, yeah, you can definitely recognize parts of yourself for sure in all of them, because they exist within all of us. And the beautiful part about archetype work is that through knowing thyself, the Plato, know thyself. When you know thyself, you can know the other. And that helps you not only be more in your own sovereignty, but understand what their sovereignty is, what their light and shadows are, not to judge and label them, but to be in deep, deep, compassionate space for yourself and for others. Because when you know yourself, again, more deeply, you know others more deeply. And I hope that answered your question. I could have literally talked all weekend just on archetypes alone. Because I absolutely adore this subject. And to that point, when you know another, it was mentioned in one of the talks before this, it's really a matter of holding up the mirror. You cannot see something in someone else, light or shadow, that does not exist somewhere within you. Because if it didn't exist there, you wouldn't even see it. You'd be totally oblivious to it all when it's showing up right in front of your face. So I thank you for that question. And I absolutely thank everyone who joined here today. I really, really appreciate it. This was so fun and so exciting. I want to thank the Guidely team for putting this all together and holding space here, the technical space, so that the presenters didn't have to concern themselves with that. I absolutely thank my divine for being here with me today. Certainly my family, my clients, my beloveds. And most importantly, I wouldn't be where I'm at today without my own teachers, guides, and mentors. Like literally, like I said, they've saved my life. They helped me from packing it in and moving down to the underworld and being Persephone, and maybe not even coming back up to the upper world at all. So it really is an important part of your wisdom council. And I do thank you for being here today. I hope you enjoy all the rest of the talks, and definitely hop on tonight to watch Deepak. I'm really super excited about that too. So thank you. And if there's nothing else, I will hopefully connect with you later.